My home is my fortress, but no home is immune to uninvited guests. Constance Bennett stood in bewilderment, unable to reach her son Bruce by phone. The previous evening, the entire family had gathered at his house to celebrate 7-year-old Melissa's birthday. Could it be that everyone had overindulged in cake and ice cream yesterday and overslept for work today? The woman got into her car and drove to Bruce's house, where he had recently moved with his wife and 2 children. When Constance entered, she immediately saw her son's body sprawled on the floor, lying in a pool of blood. The first thing she noticed was that the young man's forehead was unnaturally caved in. In horror, the woman fell to her knees and screamed, "What happened?" fully aware that he wouldn't answer. Mrs. Bennett didn't yet know that she had lost not only her son that night. The city of Aurora, Colorado, is located at the foot of the legendary Rocky Mountains. Over the past 50 years, Aurora's population has nearly tripled. In the 1980s, about 160,000 people lived there, and one of Aurora's residents in 1984 was the Bennett family. 27-year-old Bruce Bennett, his 26-year-old wife Deborah, and their daughters, 7-year-old Melissa and 3-year-old Vanessa, lived in a quiet neighborhood in a cozy family home they had recently moved into. Bruce worked at a furniture store, and Deborah helped him. It was their family business. At the same time, the young man was studying at a local college to become an air traffic controller, hoping to land a job at the airport in the future. The couple bought a new house and continued to work diligently. Evenings were spent in a quiet family setting with their girls, and they generally tried to lead a calm, measured life without arguments or scandals. Everything was going well until one day both spouses, without any warning, simply didn't show up for work. On January 16, 1984, the furniture store where Bruce and Deborah worked never opened. This was more than strange because the previous evening, relatives had attended a party at the Bennett's home for Melissa's birthday. They all had a wonderful time and left around 9 p.m., as everyone had to get up early for work the next day, Monday. But now Bruce and Deborah didn't show up for work and weren't answering phone calls. Bruce's mother, Constance, unable to get a response, drove to their house and found the garage door wide open and the front door unlocked. Both cars were still in the driveway, meaning the couple hadn't gone anywhere. Constance entered the house, and that's when she discovered her son's body at the foot of the stairs. He was covered in blood, his forehead unnaturally caved in. The woman ran outside and immediately called the Aurora Police Department. Constance was so distraught that she couldn't immediately recall Bruce's home address, as the family had only recently moved into this house. When law enforcement officers arrived at the scene, they discovered several more bodies. Bruce was found lying on his back with his feet toward the stairs, suggesting he had fallen from the top. The man had a blunt head injury and a deep cut on his throat. A bloody handprint was found on the wall. It was assumed that the attack on Bruce occurred while he was on the second floor near the stairs, as several balusters, the support posts of the railing, were broken during the fall. Bruce Bennett was dead. Investigators from the Aurora Police Department stated that as soon as they entered the house and climbed the blood-stained stairs, they immediately sensed the smell of fear permeating the home. The second floor resembled a bloody slaughterhouse. In the master bedroom, detectives found Deborah. She was lying curled up near the bed in a pool of her own blood. The woman was dressed in underwear. She had likely been dragged from the bed and struck multiple times on the head. Deborah's jaw was damaged and several teeth were missing. One of them was found on the other side of the room. All the drawers in the bedroom were pulled out or broken. Someone had clearly rummaged through their contents. However, this wasn't the last horrific scene in the house. The Bennetts had 2 daughters. When officers entered another bedroom, they found a bloody pile of bedding on the floor, and beneath it lay Melissa's body. Her skull was so badly crushed that brain matter was visible. The victim's arms were raised upward, with cuts resembling defensive wounds. The girl's pajamas were cut at the waist, her legs spread apart. This suggested that Melissa had been a victim of assault. In the same bedroom stood another small bed. The Bennett sisters slept in one room, and on this bed, Between the mattress and the wall lay Vanessa, covered in blood. Arriving paramedics confirmed 3 deaths. When one of the paramedics approached Vanessa, they noticed she was still breathing. Her plush teddy bear, which the girl had tried to shield herself with from the attacker, was splattered with blood. Fragments of the victim's teeth were found on it. 3-year-old Vanessa was rushed to the hospital, where she underwent emergency surgery and was placed in the intensive care unit. The bodies of the other Bennett family members were sent for autopsy to the office of the forensic medical examiner. Meanwhile, investigators photographed the crime scene, collected evidence, and tried to reconstruct the timeline of the perpetrator's actions. On the floor beneath 7-year-old Melissa's body, detectives found distinctive knife scratches, and on the carpet in the master bedroom where Deborah lay, they discovered a bloody outline of a tool resembling a hammer, but the hammer itself was nowhere to be found. In addition, experts found several fingerprints that could have belonged to the perpetrator. There were blood traces on the bedding and carpets, possibly not belonging to the victims. Specialists also detected traces of seminal fluid on Melissa's bedding. All of this was meticulously collected and sent to the laboratory. Of course, in the 1980s, DNA comparison was not yet a method of investigation, so the samples were simply preserved in hopes they might prove useful in the future when the perpetrator was caught. Outside the house, Deborah's purse, smeared with blood, was found discarded. A butcher knife was also found in the snow in the yard. This knife, it seemed, had been taken from the kitchen set in the Bennett's home. Detectives suggested it could have been a failed burglary, but Constance, Bruce's mother, said that at first glance nothing appeared to be missing from the house. Bruce's brothers contacted the investigator and reported that the perpetrator could have entered through the garage. The previous evening, as they were leaving the family party for Melissa's birthday, they noticed the garage door was open. One of the brothers even returned to the house and reminded Bruce to close the garage. Aurora residents, upon learning of an intruder's invasion into an ordinary family's home and the deaths of nearly all its members, began frantically buying locks, reinforcing garage doors, and purchasing not only weapons and knives, but also helmets, as people feared having their heads smashed while they slept. The autopsy revealed that the cause of Deborah Bennett's death was blunt force trauma to the head, while Bruce and Melissa died from craniocerebral injuries as well as stab wounds. Relatives and friends of the Bennett family were devastated by grief and prayed for Vanessa's survival, but the girl's chances of recovery were slim. The Bennetts had bought this house just 4 weeks earlier. They were good, decent people. Neighbors and those who knew the deceased couple had no idea who could have wanted to harm them. Meanwhile, little Vanessa was in the hospital in a coma. Her skull was fractured, her jaw was so shattered that bone fragments had lodged in her throat, and there were severe hematomas on her arms and legs. Due to the attack, the girl also had pelvic bone injuries. Sometime later, a miracle happened. 3-year-old Vanessa finally regained consciousness. She remembered almost nothing about what had happened to her. The girl was taken in by her grandparents, Bruce's parents, and she had to relearn how to walk and talk. Grandmother Constance told the girl that she had a mother, Deborah, a father, Bruce, and an older sister, Melissa. The only thing the woman kept from her granddaughter was what had actually happened to Vanessa's family. The girl remembered her home, but her brain had blocked out childhood memories of that horrific night, which greatly aided her rehabilitation. The Bennett family appealed to the public for help in finding the perpetrators. They shared what they had gone through, losing 3 loved ones at once. The police launched a large-scale investigation, but it led nowhere. There were no signs of a break-in or any other motive for the massacre of an entire family. However, this wasn't the only unsolved crime in Aurora. That same year, 1984, another couple was attacked in their home. Before we continue, support the channel by subscribing, liking this video, and writing your comment on this case after watching the video. Thank you. 12 days before nearly the entire Bennett family was found dead, on January 4th, A distressing call came into the 911 emergency service around 2:30 a.m. from the Haubenschild couple. Kimberly woke up to a loud noise and was shocked to see an unfamiliar figure with a hammer standing at the foot of the bed. The woman started calling for her husband, James, who was lying beside her, but he wouldn't wake up. At that moment, the intruder forcefully threw the hammer at Kimberly, striking her on the head, and ran out of the room. Fortunately, James came to and tried to chase the perpetrator. Kimberly, sitting on the bed, felt liquid running into her eyes. At that moment, she didn't realize it was blood. The woman grabbed the phone and called 911. When the police arrived, they found both spouses with blood streaming from their heads. They were immediately taken to the hospital. The man had a fractured skull and his wife had a concussion. At the crime scene, investigators found no signs of a break-in. However, the garage door was open and the door leading from the garage to the house was unlocked. In the bedroom, detectives indeed found the weapon, a bloodied hammer, a crowbar, the kind many families typically kept in their homes for household tasks. No fingerprints were found on the tool, but they noticed tracks in the snow that led officers to a nearby house. Just to be safe, the police searched the neighbor's house and determined that the intruder had run through it and exited onto a busy street where his tracks were lost. Near the house, officers also found a woman's purse belonging to Kimberly Haubenschild, but nothing was missing from it. The contents were simply dumped out in the snow, though the attack initially appeared to be a burglary, but ultimately nothing was stolen. As soon as Kimberly and James received medical attention, investigators began questioning them about the nighttime attack. The man recounted that he couldn't sleep that evening. He was sitting in the kitchen, recording music onto cassettes. Around 2 a.m., he went to bed and fell asleep instantly. As it turned out, they had indeed forgotten to close the garage door that evening. James woke up to his wife screaming nearby. He didn't immediately understand what had happened. His head was pounding, and his arm was severely swollen. The man chased after the intruder but couldn't catch up because his vision suddenly blurred, and he fell. Later, he recalled that after the first blow, he tried to shield himself with his arm. This caused it to swell, and James passed out from the pain. Kimberly told law enforcement officers that the stranger was a fairly large man. She didn't see his face, but could make out the outline of his figure. The woman didn't believe the attack could have been carried out by the neighbor whose house the tracks led to. By the way, the intruder brought the hammer with him. The Haubenschields suspected he had been watching them for some time, as he attacked only after James went to bed. While the Aurora police were searching for the perpetrator, another crime occurred in the city. Late on the evening of January 9th or early morning of January 10th, 28-year-old Donna Dixon was attacked in her own home. This happened after the woman returned from work. She was a flight attendant. The next day, Donna had arranged to meet her boyfriend, Ron. Before heading home, she stopped by a grocery store and then pulled into her driveway to pick up the mail. Dixon drove her car into the garage where, it seems, an unknown assailant attacked her. None of the neighbors heard anything. Donna's boyfriend, Ron, arrived early in the morning and noticed strange brownish stains on the garage threshold. When he looked inside, he found his girlfriend lying on the floor in a pool of blood seeping from her head. The woman was still alive. Ron immediately called 911 and Donna was urgently taken to the hospital, but the man was asked to stay as the police suspected him of the attack. In the garage, next to Donna's car, detectives found a large pool of blood. There was also blood on the car seats and a hammer. Presumably, the weapon used in the crime was lying on the floor. At the hospital, it was determined that Donna had been struck multiple times on the head and subjected to assault. Fortunately, the woman survived and recounted what happened. After Dixon drove into the garage and opened her car door, she was immediately hit in the temple with a hammer, which, as it later turned out, didn't belong to either her or Ron. The stranger then dragged Donna out of the car onto the garage floor, took advantage of her helplessness, and then fled, leaving her to die. The woman bled for several hours. Doctors told Donna that if it had been warm outside, she wouldn't have survived. The cold caused her blood to coagulate, delaying her death. Her boyfriend, Ron, slept at the foot of Donna's hospital bed with a gun he had recently purchased. The man feared the perpetrator would return to finish her off. Dixon survived, but she suffered memory loss, which prevented her from immediately recalling the details of the crime. From time to time, brief memories returned, but Donna was so disoriented that she couldn't piece them together. When investigators told the victim about another woman who was attacked on the same day, January 10, 1984, Dixon began to cry and couldn't stop. It was all so horrific that Donna genuinely didn't want to recall what she had been through. 50-year-old Patricia Smith was in a house in Lakewood, which she shared with her daughter Sherry and grandchildren. Lakewood was about a 30-minute drive from Aurora, Colorado. Patricia's daughter was going through a divorce, so her mother moved in to help with the children. Besides being a caring mother and grandmother, Smith was also a successful businesswoman. Patricia worked as an interior designer across the state. Every morning, she drove her daughter to a park, where Sherry caught a bus to work. In the evening, after finishing her tasks, the mother picked Sherry up at the parking lot. They collected the children from daycare together and drove home. On the evening of January 10, 1984, Sherry didn't see her mother. Patricia was never late. She knew she had to pick up the kids. So, when the woman didn't show up that day, Sherry immediately sensed something was wrong. In the end, another family member gave her a ride. They picked up the children, and when they returned home, they noticed the house was dark. Only the window of Patricia's upstairs bedroom was lit. Sherry didn't understand what was happening. She noticed the garage door was open, and her mother's car was still inside. Patricia had planned to run errands after dropping off her daughter, but apparently, she hadn't gone anywhere. When Sherry and the children entered the house, they immediately saw Patricia. The woman was lying on her back about 2 meters from the front entrance. Her face was covered with a children's blanket featuring Winnie the Pooh, and her arms were folded across her chest like those of the deceased. Her bra and shirt were pulled up, and her jeans were pulled down, yet Patricia was still wearing her boots. Sherry immediately realized her mother was gone. She quickly ushered the children outside and went with them to the neighbors to call emergency services. Arriving investigators suggested that as soon as Patricia entered the house, the perpetrator attacked her. The victim's belongings and purse were dumped on the floor. Nearby lay a bag of groceries. Among other items was a receipt for a fast food purchase at noon. This meant the woman's death likely occurred between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. The autopsy revealed that Patricia had been struck 17 times on the head with a blunt object, presumably a hammer. This was the cause of her death. Smith was also subjected to assault by the attacker. The police questioned Sherry about possible enemies her mother might have had who could have had a motive to do such a thing. The young woman gave the police 4 names of people from Patricia's hometown in Nebraska who might have had grievances against her mother. Detectives checked the suspects' alibis, and it turned out none of them had even left their state. So, for lack of evidence, yet another attack remained unsolved. Although the Aurora Police Department suspected these crimes were somehow connected and strikingly similar, each case was assigned different detectives, and there was no collaboration between them until the bloody massacre of the Bennett family occurred. The Aurora community was in horror and disarray. The media even gave the perpetrator the nickname, the Hammer Killer. When investigators decided to link all these attacks together, the theory of a possible serial maniac emerged. The crime scenes in all cases had one common feature. They were all located near construction sites. So the perpetrator could have been a construction worker, which is why he used a hammer as a weapon. An FBI specialist was brought in to create a profile of the criminal attacking residential homes. According to the profiler, this person deliberately sought out open garages. If the door leading into the house was unlocked, he immediately began attacking the occupants. If a lock blocked his path, he simply moved on to search elsewhere. It didn't matter to him who he attacked. The perpetrator also robbed his victims but took only inexpensive items or a few dollars in cash. He was sloppy and unsophisticated. Most likely, he was a white male in his 20s without a college education. The most alarming thing was that he would likely continue attacking until he was arrested or killed. The perpetrator likely had mental health issues but never sought treatment for them. The police tried to check construction workers who worked at sites near the attack locations. However, this proved difficult. Most construction companies lacked all the necessary employee documentation and identification. Investigators attempted to identify the perpetrator based on the FBI specialist's profile, but failed here as well. Ultimately, the blood on the carpet in the Bennett family's home was identified as type A, but this led nowhere. There was simply nothing to compare the blood type to. Detectives couldn't identify a single specific suspect. The survivors of the attacks among the victims had nearly lost hope that the perpetrator would ever be found. For many years, these cases remained unsolved. In the 2000s, the Colorado Police Department ordered a re-examination of the physical evidence from the Aurora attacks. An officer carrying out the task found something overlooked in the initial investigation. On 7-year-old Melissa Bennett's pajamas in the crotch area, a single hair was found. And years later, the police had a chance to extract a DNA profile. It was a risky process that could ultimately destroy the only real piece of evidence, but they took the risk. On March 1, 2001, 17 years after the attacks and massacres in Aurora, the DNA from the crime scene at the Bennett family's home was entered into the FBI database. Unfortunately, no matches were found. But in 2002, an arrest warrant was issued for an unknown perpetrator based on the analysis of his DNA. It's considered the first arrest warrant issued in Colorado based solely on DNA without identifying the suspect's identity. In 2010, the Aurora police announced that DNA analysis officially linked the Bennett family case and the Patricia Smith case, though the perpetrator's identity still hadn't been established. Knowing that these crimes were almost certainly committed by the same person should have revitalized both investigations and given authorities new directions to pursue the culprit. And in 2016, using age-progressed DNA phenotyping, experts finally obtained an image of the possible suspect based on his DNA. One image showed what the perpetrator might have looked like in 1984, and the other showed what he might look like now. While the police tried to find the perpetrator, the surviving victims did their best to return their lives to normal. The Haubenschild couple, Kimberly and James, moved out of their home shortly after the attack. Every night, they listened for the slightest noise and eventually decided to change their place of residence. The husband and wife also couldn't be in public because they didn't know the attacker's face and feared he might be nearby, ready to finish what he started. The surviving flight attendant, Donna Dixon, had to undergo a long journey of recovery. Her boyfriend, Ron, was constantly by her side and upon completion of her treatment, proposed to her. Ron never lost faith that his girlfriend would recover and overcome this ordeal. Visiting her hospital room every day, he tried to make Donna laugh so she could forget her tragic experience and start enjoying life again. They later married. The sole survivor of the Bennett family, 3-year-old Vanessa, grew up, but her life changed drastically after the deaths of her parents and older sister. Although Vanessa didn't remember the details of that night, the metal plate in her forehead involuntarily reminded her of the most horrific day of her childhood. She still suffered from the attack's consequences, including paralysis of the left side of her body. Vanessa shared that, as a child, she couldn't understand why she was different from her peers. All the kids mocked her because of how she looked. She was constantly asked what happened to her face. The girl didn't know how to respond. This caused her to grow angry with her grandmother. Eventually, in high school, after an attempt to take her own life, Vanessa was sent to a boarding school. She was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, borderline personality disorder, ADHD, and bipolar disorder. Unable to cope with her issues, the girl began drinking alcohol and smoking marijuana, and at 19, she became pregnant. She gave birth successfully, but at 3 months, her child was taken away because Bennett couldn't care for him. It got to the point where Vanessa lived under a bridge for a time. She also ended up in jail multiple times for shoplifting and illegal possession of controlled substances. The sole survivor had said goodbye to her own life more than once. After all her loved ones were killed in one night by the hammer killer, the girl didn't value the chance she'd been given. Bennett simply couldn't handle the pain of losing her parents and didn't understand why she had to endure so much suffering. Her childhood trauma undermined not only her physical condition, but also shattered her psyche. All the victims spent much of their subsequent lives waiting for the police to catch the perpetrator. They all deserved justice after years spent in fear, and would only feel safe if the murderer was behind bars. In 2018, the police department held a press conference attended by detectives who had worked on the investigations of the residential attacks in Aurora over the years. Many of the officers had already retired, passing the cases to new personnel, and finally, a breakthrough occurred in the case. Specialists discovered a match with the perpetrator's DNA in the CODIS database. This is the national U.S. database that stores DNA profiles of convicted criminals, unsolved crime traces, and missing persons. The attacks on Aurora residents had haunted multiple generations of police officers who continued to search for the perpetrator year after year, someone who dared to raise a hand even against little girls. And now, the authorities had the name of a real person suspected of the massacres: Alexander Christopher Ewing. By that time, he was already in custody for another crime. Naturally, his guilt first had to be proven, but having the specific name of the perpetrator was a monumental breakthrough in the case. As it turned out, Alex Ewing was already serving a sentence in Nevada for an attack that occurred back in 1984. On August 9, 1984, this man entered the home of Chris and Nancy Barry in Henderson, Nevada. He attacked the couple while they were peacefully sleeping in their bed. The man used an axe handle as a weapon. The police found the couple in their bedroom with blood everywhere. Both of Nancy's arms were broken, and Chris was beaten unconscious. But both spouses clung to life because their young children were sleeping in another room. One was 2 years old, and the other had been born recently. When the police arrived, Nancy and Chris didn't know whether the attacker had left their home or was still somewhere nearby. The first thing the young parents asked the officers was whether their children were okay. Fortunately, both toddlers were sleeping soundly in their cribs. Nancy recounted hearing a strange noise in the middle of the night and going to investigate its source. In her own kitchen, she saw an unfamiliar man and ran back to the room where Chris was still sleeping. The intruder followed her and struck Nancy with the axe handle on her arms as she tried to reach for the phone, then turned on Chris. The woman pretended to be dead, and eventually, the perpetrator left the bedroom. The couple didn't know if he was still in the house. Chris was unconscious, and Nancy, with her broken arms, was too afraid to leave the bedroom. To the great relief of the parents, the toddlers were found alive and unharmed. While the Barrys were taken to the hospital due to their injuries, relatives stayed with the children. The only evidence at the crime scene was footprints. The police printed a composite sketch of the attacker and canvassed neighboring homes, then deployed a helicopter. Detectives believed a fugitive convict might be involved. Eventually, the man was spotted at a payphone. He tried to flee, but, realizing the futility of his actions, Alex Ewing surrendered to the police. On February 28, 1985, a court found him guilty of attempting to take the lives of the Barry couple and sentenced him to 100 years in prison. Alex was indeed a fugitive criminal. Before the attack on Chris and Nancy, he had been in prison for another crime. On January 27, 1984, 11 days after the massacre of the Bennett family in Colorado, Ewing attacked a man named Roy Williams in Arizona. Williams woke up to a powerful blow to the head. Not understanding what was happening, Roy lifted his head and saw a stranger standing by the bed. The man asked the uninvited guest what he was doing there. Instead of answering, the intruder fled. He bolted through the back door and vanished into the darkness. Like the other attacks by the Hammer Killer, this one also occurred under the cover of night, so Roy couldn't describe the attacker. However, his shoe print was left in the snow in the yard. Investigators made a copy of the print and sent it to other agencies. 7 hours later, an officer driving along a local highway near Roy Williams's house noticed a hitchhiker on the roadside. The man was asked to show the sole of his shoe, and the print perfectly matched the attacker's footwear. Realizing he was about to be arrested, the stranger ran. Eventually, the hitchhiker was found hiding in the bushes. It was none other than Alex Ewing, who was just 23 years old at the time. He was charged with robbery and attempted murder of Roy Williams. The weapon this time was a large rock. Because the county jail was overcrowded at the time, Ewing was sent to a correctional facility out of state, where he remained for the next 9 months. On August 9, 1984, Alex, along with other inmates, was placed in a special van headed to Nevada. At a gas station, the van stopped, and the prisoners were allowed to use the restroom. Alex didn't return. He escaped. The police didn't realize how dangerous a convict they had let slip. The fugitive wasn't immediately found, though several reports came in from Henderson residents. One woman called 911 and reported that an unknown man had tried to break into her home. When he failed, he attempted to steal a parked car. The stranger matched Ewing's description. Another woman, in hysterics, called emergency services and reported that a man had entered their home while she and her husband were sleeping and began striking them with a club. The victim urged the dispatcher to hurry, as she didn't know if the perpetrator had left their home. This was the home of the Berry couple. In 1984, when Alex Ewing was arrested for the attack on Roy Williams and later for the attack on Nancy and Chris Berry, DNA comparison technology didn't exist, nor was there a CODIS database. It was established only in 1994, consolidating fragmented state and local DNA data into one main database. CODIS began fully functioning in 1998. DNA samples started being required from all arrestees, but the data of those already serving sentences weren't entered into the database until much later. Nevada state law began requiring DNA from individuals serving sentences for felony convictions around 2016. As soon as the Colorado police identified the Hammer Killer's name, they learned that Alex Ewing was scheduled for parole. The hearing on this matter was set for July 27, 2018, but fortunately, it was postponed, so investigators from Colorado urgently traveled to Nevada to question Ewing. Initially, the detectives didn't tell Alex why they had come, simply asking the inmate to talk about his life. That's how they learned that Ewing had been in Aurora for about a year, working at various construction sites, as mentioned in the FBI profile. Only then did they show him photographs of Patricia Smith and the deceased members of the Bennett family. The man jumped up and began shouting that it was a mistake, that he was seeing these people for the first time. At the time, Alex was 57 years old. His file noted that he had been charged with burglary in 1979 when he was about 17 years old. So this man could be considered a fairly experienced criminal. In total, Alex Ewing attacked at least 6 homes, leaving behind bodies and ruining the lives of surviving victims. However, when it came time to press charges, it turned out that due to a 34-year statute of limitations, Ewing could no longer be tried for assault and causing serious bodily harm. The only option was to charge him with the murders of 4 people: 50-year-old Patricia Smith, 27-year-old Bruce, 26-year-old Deborah, and 7-year-old Melissa Bennett. Sometime later, Alex Ewing was extradited to Colorado, where he faced a jury trial. During the proceedings, it emerged that in 1984, the police, unaware of what they were doing, destroyed some of the evidence. The Aurora Police Department's investigations were deemed substandard. Most items the perpetrator touched in the house weren't actually tested for DNA, including the knife and the purse found in the yard in front of the house. Nevertheless, in 2021, Alexander Christopher Ewing was found guilty of the deaths of Bruce, Deborah, and Melissa Bennett and received 3 life sentences. In April 2022, he was found guilty of the murder of Patricia Smith and sentenced to an additional life term. Justice caught up with Ewing 37 years after he committed his crimes. During the reading of the first verdict, the man showed no emotion, expressed no remorse, and simply accepted it as inevitable. But during the second trial, the 61-year-old Alex claimed it was all a setup, that the crime had been pinned on him because someone needed to be blamed. In prison, Alex Ewing created an online dating profile, describing himself as a rugged outdoor enthusiast who enjoys camping, cars, animals, and old movies. He wrote that he's far from a saint and is looking for a woman around 50 who could be his good friend. And surely, there will be someone who actually wants to support this monster. The surviving Vanessa Bennett, upon learning that the perpetrator who sent her entire family to the grave would spend the rest of his days behind bars, took full responsibility for the choices she had made in life. Despite all the hardships she endured, the woman now looked to the future with optimism. She began treatment for her addictions and met her son for the first time since she was forced to give him up. And now they keep in touch. The little girl who couldn't cope with her childhood trauma grew into an adult woman. Vanessa is now clean and sober. She lives in Arizona with her second husband, and they have 2 daughters. Today, she is 43 years old. The physical injuries she sustained that night still cause her discomfort, while the emotional suffering has simply faded into the background over time. Although justice prevailed after so many years, Vanessa's life was shattered to its core. Only in her 40s did Bennett stop feeling like a victim and begin rebuilding her life brick by brick. Her dream is to write a book and help people struggling with addiction, just as she did. Writing helps her release the emotions she suppressed for many years. If you have finished watching, you are a real fan of true crime. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notifications, and put the like. See you in the next video.